for 3 straight days. And she was a lot more charming than me the entire time. But her real strength is she's been a guide for nearly 20 years and a professional bird guide for over a decade. She has explored and guided several parts of the world before making Australia and Tasmania her home. Kat has mostly guided in southern Australia and Queensland, and has dedicated the last 4 years to guiding for birds and wildlife in Tasmania and the Inala Reserve. And oddly enough, I got some really positive feedback about Kat from somebody who had birded with her at Lamington National Park some time ago. So there you go. Besides birds, Kat does love mammals and other aspects of natural history. And today she will share her expertise on birds, mammals, and other aspects of Tasmanian natural history. Go, Kat Davidson.
Thank you, Charles. A very kind introduction. I'm very delighted to be here with you all today and to introduce you to a slice of Tasmania. And I do hope you will fall as much in love with it as I am. And if you haven't already been, get here as soon as the universe allows you to. So this frontispiece here is the glorious platypus, who I chose just because it's such an iconic representation of Australia as a whole. But we are the island state right at the bottom. And so if you haven't already familiarized yourself with where Tasmania is, here's a wee map for you. So you can see us right down the bottom. The Bass Strait separates us. And I am on the island, off the island, off the island. So that second box down below is Bruny Island, right in the very bottom corner of Tasmania. And just before I launch into everything, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respect to the Palawa people, as they were the original owners and the continuing custodians of this land, whose name is actually Lutrawita rather than Tasmania. And I am on Lunawana Alana, which is the name for Bruny Island, and the Nuanoni people were the people who lived here. So this is a representation of Tasmania versus the size of the UK. So you can see that we are quite a large island. Often people do think we're very tiny and think they can zoom around us in a day or two, but you can see we are quite chunky. Now this is 12 endemic birds. Now these are Tasmania's 12, and they are all very different and very glorious, and range from the very small and brown to the very large and noisy. And I'll go into detail on a few of them throughout the presentation and also come back to this slide at the end. But of course, if you're coming to Tasmania, you very much want to snaffle all 12 of these as fast as possible. And every tour we do is designed to do that. So starting with Bruny Island, I, as Charles said, am just near Inala. Now, Inala is many things, but when this situation I'm talking about it as a physical entity, it's a conservation reserve, and it's based right in the south of the island. To get to us, you get on this ferry and you zoom across a 15-minute strait on the D'Entrecasteaux Channel. And everyone who lives on Bruny Island absolutely loves the ferry. It's this small hiatus of time when you glide across the water with perhaps a penguin in the water next to you, or perhaps a seal, or perhaps an albatross. So it's a very lovely way to return home. This is the iconic view on Bruny Island. It's a North Island and a South Island, and in between the two, the sand built up over millennia and has formed a tombolo. And this is called the neck. And on the neck, there's a penguin colony and a short-tailed shearwater colony. And we go there frequently on our evening tours to see those wonderful nocturnal birds. Now here is our first endemic, and it's often the first one that someone sees when they arrive in Tasmania. It is called the native hen, or Tribonx mortieri. Locally, she's known as the turbo chook. In Australia, anything that looks vaguely like a chicken gets the name chook. And so she's turbo because she cannot fly, They can only run, but they can run hell of a fast. And 60 kilometers an hour is the oft-quoted number. And they really do hoon about the fields, and they're marvelous wee things. That very bright red eye is quite striking. And when they run, they look so like dinosaurs. Absolutely love them. And this is one of the mammals on the island, which you may be fortunate enough to see. It's a Bennett's wallaby, but this is a white morph. Being an island, our ecology is often dictated by genetics over time, and a smaller population can lead to higher numbers of mutations. And so this particular white mutation occurs in quite a few of our wallabies on the island. So not only are you getting this glorious, bouncing Australian iconic animal, but you're seeing it in these Alice in Wonderland ridiculous colors, which is just marvelous. There's so many rich birding habitats and wildlife habitats in Tasmania. And Bruny Island is like Tasmania condensed into an even smaller island. And on that, one of our most important habitats is temperate rainforest. So this is the tree fern, Dicksonia antarctica, and she is now becoming a very endangered habitat worldwide. Rainforest is. But in Australia, as the mainland gets hotter and dries out more, we're losing our rainforest. So every tiny patch of rainforest is so crucial, and Tasmania has a lot of this very important habitat. This is one of the birds I mentioned I saw this morning, the green Rosella. And you can see it's definitely not green. It's one of these names that throws you for a loop, but they're green when they're young. So they start off very green and then they age up to this gorgeous yellow. This is Platycercus caledonicus, and with platypus, it means broad foot, and Platycercus here means broad tail. And it is a broad-tailed parrot, and it's the largest Rosella in Australia. There's so many different glorious cockatoos and parrots and Rosellas around, and we have a good selection of them in Tasmania, and quite often I'll be saying this is the largest of, because the island ecology again has led to a breeding of some larger sizes, sometimes due to lack of predators, but in this case we're not quite sure why we have the largest Rosella, but we're going with it. This is a eucalypt forest, so beautiful, so iconic for Australia, and we call it sclerophyll. So we have dry sclerophyll forests and we have wet sclerophyll forests, and they're where you find the predominant amount of your bush birds. And there's often 3 levels, a lovely ground layer, a mid-story, and then a canopy layer of birds. Ooh. And one of the birds you'll find in the mid-story and the canopy is this yellow-throated honeyeater, Lycanastolus flavicolus, and she's fabulous bird, really, really beautiful. That green back changes color every day, no matter what the light level, it always looks slightly different. And that stunning yellow throat gets larger as it ages. Bird calls, of course, so tricky. This one doesn't make it easy at all. It has 18 different variations that you have to learn throughout the year. And also it likes to be fairly silent at this time of year. So currently when I'm tracking down a yellowthroat, I'm listening for things like the sound of it pulling bark off the trees. Makes it very tricky. A little bit of gorgeous seascape just for some atmosphere. We have dolerite cliffs all around. I won't go into geology, but when you're here, the geology of Tasmania is as fascinating as its many other aspects. Here's another of our endemic honeyeaters. This is Melothripsis validorostis, the strong-billed honeyeater. Many honeyeaters in the family have long curved bills for eating honey, for getting into flowers that they have evolved along with to really maximize getting nectar and pollen and honey. But this one is not that side of the family. It just happens to sit within that name, but it has a very short stubby beak and it's all about insects and bugs and pulling at the bark, and it's just wonderful. Absolutely love it. Down in Tasmania, we don't have certain species like tree creepers or satellas that you might find up on mainland Australia. And so other birds for us have had to move in to that niche. And this is one of the ones that has moved in to fill in a tree creeper niche, upside down on branches. Glorious ocean everywhere, filled with kelp forests And on the beaches around Tasmania, we get lots of lovely little shorebirds. However, we are the bottom of the migration route. If you're going to Australia for shorebirds, you often start up the very top on the east where the birds arrive, and then you make your way down, sorry, the west, I'm talking west up in Darwin, and then you make your way down, 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 down. So a bird that reaches us has traveled the entire length. So these are hooded plovers, little 3 chicks and 2 parents there, very endangered, in lots of trouble. The usual, humans, dogs, cars on beaches, all the things. But on Bruni, wonderfully, they're doing well. Some more gorgeous sandstone mixing with dolerite. And here's one of our other marvelous mammals on the island. This is the eastern quoll, also endangered. The quolls are related to Tasmanian devils, but you may not be at all as familiar with a quoll. It may be the first time you've ever heard the word. And even Australians often, sadly, aren't very familiar with quolls. But these adorable little things are about the size of a kitten, and they're nocturnal. And when you go on the night tours, you see these little things skittering about. It's just marvelous. They eat a lot of insects, so they come out onto the roads to get all the insects that have hit cars during the day, which gives us a chance to see them. And knuckling
Kat, would this be a good time to stop for some questions?
Oh, of course.
Let's just see if anybody's got any questions out there. Anybody got any questions at all? You're welcome to ask. You're welcome to unmute and ask. And I hate to slow Kat down because she's doing great here.
So how hot does it get down there? What's your temperature in January's?
We're very comparable to Britain. So Australians talk of Tasmania as if you're living in Antarctica when you're down here, but you're really not. It's very moderate. It's currently most days are over 20, 20 to 25. Absolutely delightful. And winter is a little more wet, a little more cold, but if we go under 0, it's a rare occurrence. Nothing like growing up in Scotland, I can tell you that. Very pleasant.
I have a question about the little animal that you just showed, the quokka.
The quoll.
Quoll,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I get it mixed up with the quokka. Is it a marsupial as well?
It is, yes.
Oh, okay.
So marsupial often is thought of as being with a pouch, but it isn't necessarily. And we have a lot of marsupials who don't have pouches, and this is one of them. And when she gives birth to up to 30 live young, but she only has 6 nipples, so only 6 can survive.
Oh.
So it's a little bit of strongest until they're up on the nipple, and then she actually eats the remaining ones.
Oh, wow.
And then those 6 will grow to be her joeys, her pups.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Hey, just so most Americans can put 20 degrees into perspective, Kat was speaking in Celsius. They're very Fahrenheit oriented. So 20 degrees Celsius is 668 degrees Fahrenheit. So it really is quite a nice temperature. And then in the wintertime, Kat, what months is that? And about what's the average daily temperature? Just ballpark it.
So we think of winter usually as June, July, August, September-ish.
Okay.
The shoulders can be really delightful though. And this, we just had the most perfect winter. So yeah, our winters aren't really winters, but they're a little wetter, a little colder. And yeah, of course you notice the season shifting a little, but so much of Australia is evergreen. So we don't see the deciduous color change in the autumns that you have. And our spring is when we see a lot more color with fresh growth in the trees.
Gotcha. And so your winter month is like 15 Fahrenheit? Or Celsius?
And many days will be lurking around 10 for us, whatever that is for you. But you know, you just have an extra jumper and life goes on, and it's totally lovely.
Yeah, because I mean, Tanya Cochran, who's not on the call, but is Kat's boss and mentor, that's a fair description, and friend. says, birding at Inala year round is fine. So 10 degrees Celsius is like 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So perfectly fine with a jacket and maybe a little rain jacket. And there you go. Does that sound about right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's as bad as it gets, really. And we are known as being enormously changeable. I mean, many places in the world like to say, if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes. But Tasmania really, really, truly means it. So often it can be lashing rain and then just glorious sunshine straight after, especially in the shoulder months. So you never have to wait long for a change, which is why we pack so many different layers.
Great. Leo, any questions texted over that we've missed?
No, there's nothing coming, Charles.
Great. So feel free to text your questions in, and I think we'll go on unless anybody has any other more quick questions. We're going to go along. Go, Kat.
Marvelous. So this is the entrance to the Inala Reserve. What Tanya did over 30 years ago was she purchased 500 acres of land and then another 1,000 acres of land with the sole purpose of conserving it for wildlife. And so the tours and the accommodation and everything else we do is simply to allow this land to remain as it is and to keep all the wildlife within it as safe as possible. And the one bird that is most iconic for Inala is the 40-spotted pardalote. So this poor wee thing is in terrible trouble, and it's one of the 12 endemics, and it only feeds on one type of tree called Eucalyptus viminalis. And on the tip of its tiny little beak, this is a 10-gram bird, it has a tiny little hook, and it takes that hook and it makes a hole where the leaf meets the stem, and then the sugars in the tree ooze slowly out of that hole over hours or days, depending on the time of year and the temperature, and then the bird comes back and snips off that sugar, and it's known as manna, and that's what the bird's feeding on. And this tree used to be common across Tasmania, but 200 years ago, when white Europeans arrived, they started cutting down all the trees in all the fertile lowlands, which is where this particular tree grows. And so this little bird has suffered very badly due to that. And so now the numbers are down to less than 1,000 of the birds. And when people come to Tasmania, if they don't decide to come to Inala, they often don't see this bird on their time in Tasmania. It's that rare. Whereas at Inala, one of the reasons Tanya chose the piece of land she did is because it had 12 40-spotted pardalotes living in a tree there. And she has now nurtured that community up to about 120 to maybe 150 birds. We like to play it safe and be conservative, but the numbers just keep rising and the community keeps getting stronger. So it's fabulous how many we're managing to nurture onwards, but the story for all of Tasmania is not so cheery. So it's one of the birds that we continually champion to ensure that people are planting trees for them. This is a shot of the reserve from above, just a little snippet of it, shows a little bit of the garden, the Gondwanan garden that we have planted. We have a botanic garden there. And then you can see there's various habitats, bush, open fields, and then the ocean behind. It's a very stunning place. This is the other very rare bird that you will hopefully see when you come to Tasmania. It is the swift parrot. So she's not an endemic, it's a breeding endemic. They're found on the mainland Australia, where they go to spend the time of year when they're not breeding, and then they fly across the strait and they come to us to breed. And the flower that it's there on is a blue gum, Eucalyptus globulus. And that is also critical for this bird, and also being chopped down by the logging industry and the government. And so it's another huge campaign that we're working on, is to save the swift parrots. And they're down to less than 300 birds. But on Inala, we have a lot of blue gums and a lot of black gums and a lot of hollows and a lot of nesting boxes. And so we get to see them up close. So it's simultaneously wonderful to see them and heartbreaking, because they're so low in number. Just a lovely image of a dam at Inala, and another one of the birds that it would be impossible not to want to see when you come to Tasmania. This is a pink robin, and there are 4 robins in Tasmania, but none of them are robins. We have a pink, a flame, a scarlet, and a dusky. And there are 3 of them are old world flycatchers. All the ones with the color are actually flycatchers. And this is the brightest of the 3 with his Barbie pink tummy. Absolute delight. Very tricky to find in the wet, dark places. One of the ones that can become people's bogey birds if they don't go out with a guide. It's a glorious wee thing. More beauty, because why not? And wallabies, wallabies everywhere. We do a lot of rehabilitation work. We have sadly an enormous amount of roadkill in Tasmania. So one of the things that every guide does with the Nala is they stop at every body that we see on the road and we check the pouch. And if there's a little one in the pouch, then we take it to a Nala and we raise it, we rehabilitate it, and we release it into the reserve. So you're always seeing wallabies everywhere. It's so glorious. Moving off the island, Hobart is our main city. We, despite the size of Tasmania, have only half. Oh, Charles, you would like some more questions?
Maybe we'll take a little break and see if there's any quick questions about Ainala itself before we move to the next geographic locations. Any questions about the Ainala Reserve, which is really the heart of all of Tasmania birding because you can get all the advantages there. Any questions, folks? Then I will quiet down and
I have a question
about birding around Hobart. And there you go.
I have a question. First, you just said that most of the endemics are actually on the island there. Is that true? All of the endemics can be found on Inhala?
That's right, yes. So yeah, we're very proud that we have all 12 on the reserve, and I run a lot of property tours around the reserve, and often we do see all 12 in a 3-hour walking tour. This time of year, there's 3 birds that move up to the top of the mountains. They're altitudinal migrations, and the black cutawong and the yellow wattlebird are 2 of those birds, and they're both endemic. So they sometimes do make it tricky, but otherwise, yes, we have the habitat, we have the richness, they have the peace and security, and we have all 12. It's fabulous. The trickiest of the tricky ones is the scrub-tipped, and so he can make it very difficult.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, it's glorious.
And just of a bit of a note for sort of tour planning purposes, we do like to do a little bit of birding around Hobart in a day kind of outside of Ainala. As wonderful as the place is, booking nights there for a group is a bit of a trick. I would say darn near impossible. So, we enjoy other bits of Tasmania before we sort of delve into Ainala. But it is a wonderful place. Any other questions? All right, the show is yours, my friend.
Lovely. I mean, you're absolutely right. We never, even on all our own exploring and birding, we never just stay on Inala. It's glorious, it's rich, but Tasmania, you're just tripping over beauty and tripping over birds. And a lot of the birds aren't found on Burnie. Not the endemics, but many others. You do need to go a little further afield. This is a gorgeous image taken from the top of Kunanyi, Mount Wellington, the mountain over Hobart, looking down onto the city. So 500,000 people in the whole state, 40% of them are in Hobart. And this beautiful mountain looks over the city. It's quite the most gorgeous city I've ever had the privilege to go to. And so on top of the mountain, which is where we often do a little bit of birding, you may see a wedge-tailed eagle pass by. Now, this is the largest bird in Australia. The wedge-tailed eagle in general is the largest, but the Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle is a subspecies. She's Aquila audax fleyi, and even larger. And the female of most raptors, as I'm sure you know, is often the largest. So this one truly is a she, even though I say she is a default for so many birds. And that glorious wedge tail is just so iconic. This beautiful image by Ken and Margaret they just took last year, just near Hobart. And when you're up the top of the mountain, also some of the plants are really remarkable. So I had to chuck in a little bit of flora because I'm a big botany head myself. And this is Tilapia, the Tasmanian warata. currently in flower around Tasmania. Up the mountain, you may also see the yellow wattle bird. Our wattle birds are also honey eaters. They're part of that bigger family, but these ridiculous wattles just grow and grow throughout their lifetime, and then they get tipped in red and orange at the end. And I swear they must become a problem because they get so long. They must bash them into things and get them tangled on things. Their name is vomit bird, is a local, because the sound they make is bleh, bleh. It's not one of our most delightful ones. However, they're very beautiful to look at. And this one has a handsome yellow stomach as well. This is the mountain from underneath those gorgeous dolerite cliffs called the Organ Pipes. And that's a huge telecommunications tower they've chucked on the top. And the flame robin, another one of our colorful flycatchers, also found near the top of the mountains at this time of year. And this is the male. And he's just got his neon orange tummy going on. And a lovely view. And some of the suburban mammals are brush-tailed possums. Now, the possum of Australia was named after the opossum of America, but the only similarity is that they are both marsupials. You can see in all other regards, they're very different in appearance and behavior, but they are both adorable, I think. I know that you may not think your own opossum is adorable, judging from feedback I've had, but I think it is. And this has got two morphs here. One is the brown, the standard, and one is a mutation, the golden one. Again, the island effect on the ecology. Around the parks, we have a lot of very bright parrots around the Hobart area. Eastern Rosella is one of the most colorful and very gorgeous. This is not unique to Tasmania. You'll find Eastern Rosellas in other states as well. Some of the birds which have crossed the Bass Strait have done so naturally over time. Some have been aviary releases in Tasmania. Rainbow lorikeet is one that is not come here naturally and has now become problematic. So we do have some things which should perhaps have always stayed up on the mainland and are now mixed in with our ecology, but the Eastern Rosella came here naturally across the strait. And we have water in various forms. Of course, the ocean, we have a big long river, the Derwent River, and we have lots of lovely marshy areas in which you may find this remarkable duck, the musk duck. It's my favorite duck, and this is the male with this insane lobe that he has under his chin. And they have the ability to change their buoyancy in the water. They can puff up the air under their feathers and sit very, very high, or they can push it all out and sink right down. And the only thing you see is the head and the tail poking out. They're fabulous wee ducks. He also does raids on the female. He goes under like a submarine, sneaks up on her underwater, and then leaps out and lands on her to try and mate with her. It's right horrendous. Before I head on to Melaleuca, anyone any questions about Hobart and surrounds?
Great ask of questions. Yes, any other questions out there? Leo, any come in by text?
Nothing from my side, Charles.
Okay.
Then I shall keep on rolling. So Melaleuca is, I believe, going to be an optional extra when you were to come on some of the tours, and it is well worth doing if you get the opportunity. It is also known as the Southwest Wilderness. In Latin, Mela is black and Luca is white, and the rocks there are granite, black and white speckled, and also we have a plant, a paperbark, which has got black and white on the flower. So to get there, you have to fly. And this is the little biplane we fly down in. And it is usually little 8-seaters, absolutely lovely wee planes. And the views as you go down are spectacular. I mean, I could have done an entire presentation on just the 40-minute flight to Melaleuca because every moment it's changing and every moment it's glorious. And you're going to a protected part of Tasmania where very, very few people get to go. And the main reason you're heading there is to see this glorious bird, another very endangered parrot, another breeding endemic, the orange-bellied parrot, Neophema. Now she's quite petite, has this gorgeous orange belly, and the reason it's in so much trouble is death by 1,000 cuts, as with so many environmental reasons these days. But up on the mainland where it lives when it's not breeding, its habitat has been severely degraded. So it's even more crucial that when it comes to Tasmania, this breeding area where it goes to is safe and secure. And every birder who visits there is helping to save the bird simply by creating an economy around it being saved. So the government is willing to chip in and help out. The numbers are very, very low. Last year we were talking 20 birds. This year we're now talking 50, but that has been supplemented by some captive breeding, which they then release, and they hope that they follow the wild ones and become part of the system. But going down there and seeing one in the wild is a very, very special thing. However, it's not just the orange-bellied parrot down there. There's many other glorious birds. The button grass moorlands is the big feature down there, which is a unique habitat and very, very beautiful, just horizons that go on forever. And within that, there's ground parrots, and there's also beautiful firetail, which is one of my absolute favorites. Has this little red bottom, this glorious rubber mask on the face, and this stripy zebra tummy. Very tiny little firetail finch. And another very small one, which is incredibly elusive. And if you get a photograph, you get the gold star because it's so, so hard. This image by Keith Kennedy is one of the best I've seen recently. And it hides out in the bush down there, this beautiful little emu wren. Has a long, long feathery tail. You might just be able to see hiding in there. Adorable little thing. Any questions about Melaleuca before we jump on?
Hey, and Melaleuca is sort of like a quick extension. We do sort of well, if Kat and Tanya tell me it's best to do before the tour, that will be the plan. But it is a short flight and it's a little extra fee, but it's well worthwhile single day extension. Any other questions on your side, Leo?
Nothing from me, Charles.
Anything else from the audience? We shall continue on, my friend.
Okay. So Mount Field was the next area I picked. And Mount Field is an hour and a half or so down the river from Hobart and is also a national park. And she's incredibly beautiful, and many people go there for non-birding reasons. This spectacular waterfall, Russell Falls, is one of the many reasons that people love it. So we often sneak in before the crowds arrive to go to this particular walk, so we have it to ourselves. But it is a temperate rainforest surrounding the waterfall, and so lots of the birds that are unique to the dark and wet areas really love Mount Field. But also you'll find many, many Paddy Melons. So Paddy Melons are a subspecies of Wallaby, and they're even smaller and sometimes fluffier and debatably cuter. But this one has got a little joey there. We have them all over Bruny Island and all over Tasmania. They are nocturnal, but in these darker places, you can often see them in the daytime as well. Very, very sweet. This is a classic stream running through a waterfall in which we often look for platypus when we're there as well. And then in amongst the trees, we are looking out for the trickiest of the tricky of the 12 endemics, the smallest, brownest, quietest bird, which is the Tasmanian scrubtit. And this is quite the most amazing photo to get it lit like this at all. They are very lovely, but very tricky. So we will find them at Mount Field if we haven't already snaffled one up on Burnie. And then the next layer above the waterfall layer and the rainforest layer is these incredibly huge eucalyptus trees. These are Eucalyptus regnans, and they're the tallest of the eucalypts in the world. And the birds that live in this are either going to be right down at the ground or right up at the top, because in between it's all trunk. And they are sometimes known as mountain ash. If you've watched any documentaries on Australia, they've probably mentioned them, because they can respond quite well after fire. Some people say the fire is even required for the nuts to grow. So it's a very iconic and wonderful eucalypt, and just being underneath them makes you feel wonderfully small, like being under a Californian redwood. But in the tops of them, you will hear and see the yellow-tailed black cockatoos, which is what flew overhead for me this morning. We have sulfur crested cockatoos as well. The white ones and the black ones are so glorious. This is a male with the pink around his eye and those floofy cheeks. Just adorable. They often fly in big groups, and if you believe the old wives' tale, they fly ahead of bad weather. So you do tend to see a big flock, and then it starts raining later in the day, and then you say, aha, 'twas the bird. And on the ground, all throughout the Mountfield area, you may see a snuffly little short-beaked echidna. So as well as our platypus, which is a monotreme, a warm-blooded mammal that lays eggs, quite the contradiction. The short-beaked echidna is also a monotreme and also lays eggs. And both of them just have so many ridiculously marvelous features, things like a sense which nothing else possesses, where they can sense life. So when the echidna is sniffing the ground, he's not sniffing for scent, he's sniffing with electronic impulses that a living thing makes under the ground. And that's what he senses, and that's when they start digging to get those invertebrates. And being Tasmanian, many of our things look fluffier than the mainland versions. So the mainland echidnas just look like they have more spines, but it truly is just that they have less fluff because they don't need to stay so warm. And then the third layer at Mountfield is taking you up to the alpine area. It won't always have snow like this photo. In fact, this is probably right in the middle of winter to get even a skiff of snow up there, but it's always quite lovely and chilly and windy, and you're up into glorious alpine flora, and therefore your animals shift quite quickly too. One of the ones we find up at the top is the Wombats, who do the adorable square poos, and you find them sitting on the boardwalk, and you know you have a chance of seeing one. Cradle Mountain up in the north of the state is the most famous place to go for wombats, but you can see them in these areas closer to Hobart as well. And some of the plants up there are like this pandani, which is the largest heath plant in the world. Huge, crazy, spiky. And sitting on top of it, the iconic black currawong with this very striking bill. And he is not a corvid, despite looking like he should belong to that family. He's in with magpies and butcherbirds and wood swallows, but very strong, very carnivorous, fabulous endemic bird. And we call them the sound of the mountains because their call echoes out around the peaks. So those are the 5 areas that I was choosing to focus on today. So before we do more overall questions, anything on Mountfield?
What's the altitude when you're up in the mountains at Mountfield?
Oh, Lordy, now you're asking. Not huge. It takes maybe like 40 minutes to drive up it. I'm thinking 12,000 feet. She's pulling that number out of her arse. Don't know. I haven't learned the number. Chilly. I'll Google it desperately.
I can do the data collection there, Kat. I'll feed it back in a second. Any other questions?
You want to Google Mount Dobson, Mountfield, Lake Dobson, Mountfield, and you'll get your altitude.
I have a general question about Tasmania.
Please.
It looks like the western part is parks and reserves and things. What's it like?
So that was the Southwest Wilderness area is right in the midst of that. And the further west you go, much less people, if any, and more either dense forest or open button grassland. So wonderfully, wonderfully held in these often UNESCO World Heritage areas. We are the state where the Green Party was founded, and there was some very large campaigns to save an iconic river and Lake Pedder, and the Franklin Dam, and that coalesced the feeling that Australia had about needing to preserve these wild and fabulous places, and led to the formation of the Green Party. And that was when they started to make these huge areas of preservation, including the west there. I think even if it wasn't locked up to preserve it for environmental reasons, it would be very difficult for humans to even get into those areas. It's a very steep terrain, it's very rocky terrain. It's where people hold out a glimmer of hope that the Tasmanian tiger may still be existing. So it has a great air of romance.
Cool, thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
Is the tour in the same order that you presented this presentation?
I think it is pretty similar, apart from that Melaleuca would be offered initially up front as the optional extra. And then it starts Hobart across to Bruni and then out to Mountfield. Yes, similar.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just going to put a little bit of stuff in there. This is Chuck Thornton Colby. Yeah, so we start in Hobart and then do a bit of birding around there, but go right to Mountfield. And then we go over to Ainala. So we hit those three sites kind of almost in reverse order of what we present into them. But then truly, there's a longer Tasmania tour that we need to add to the website. So I'll just plug that now. It's about 8 days, 7 nights. And don't even ask me what the content is. Kat probably knows that tour a lot better because that's when she usually runs. But I think that's a Mount Jackson start and a Hobart in, right? The longer tour?
Yes, you're making up Mount Jackson. We don't have a Mount Jackson. Yes, and Cradle Mountain is incorporated, and I believe maybe Maria Island. Yes, and
right, and then it does have a pelagic trip, which is pretty awesome, to tell the truth. And we've done pelagic as a extension, and they're pretty awesome. If we had more time today, we would talk about the pelagic trips out of Tasmania. And I always get it's Hawk Neck or Neck Hawk, or what's the name of the town?
It's Eagle Hawk Neck on the Tasman Peninsula.
You got it totally wrong, Charles.
Oh, I was close.
So close. And it's the one day I don't do. Another Nala guide often does that day. I'm a terrible sailor. And so we have several pelagic specialists who go out with you to the shelf to see the amazing birds out there.
So, Cindy, see on the short order tour.
Charles, you're cutting out.
Pelagic adds quite a bit, ladies, right? I'm sure that's true. If you're not. Oh, crud. Did I lose you?
Yeah, no, it's you were just cutting out. The Mountfield elevation is 1434 meters.
There we go.
Yeah, so about 5,000 feet.
So close with my 12,000.
So I have a historical question.
Please.
So how much, since the first humans entered Tasmania, how much of the forest was cleared by burning or forestry later by prisoners or more recently, and how much is considered to be virgin?
Yeah, We're learning all the time, because the Aboriginal people who have been in Australia for 45 to perhaps 60,000 years or more, they moved through the landscape using fire a great deal to manage it, and did it in an often called a mosaic burning fashion. And they did create in Tasmania quite a few open areas. So difficult to know exactly, because sadly a lot of the knowledge of their culture has been lost. So we're taking a lot of the messages from the land itself rather than getting to learn it from the people. But we know that a lot of Tasmania has been influenced by humans, whether Aboriginal or in the last 200 years, enormously by European settlers. Yes, the industries here have been whaling, have been timber, have been farming, all of which have left very big impacts. Now tourism is one of the major industries of Tasmania, and it means that conservation and environmentalism can work much closer with that industry, because the two things are of course mutually beneficial. People are coming here to see these wonderful landscapes, birds and animals, so everyone is on board with helping to preserve them. So to really answer your question is, I don't know. We don't know. There are some areas that may never have been walked by any human foot, especially in the western side, but a lot of it will have been influenced by fire one way or another. Natural fires do occur, of course, from lightning and other sources, but a lot of those fires have either been deliberately or accidentally caused by humans. So yeah, fire has been the biggest impact, and then clearing for farming. The native hen, which I mentioned first up with the endemics, is probably one of the few birds to have benefited from the amount of clearing we've done, because that's its habitat, open fields, scrubby edges. But nearly every other bird requires dense bush and foliage, and so everything will have felt the impact of humans.
Right. Another question that we got over text, Kat, is between the longer tour and our shorter tour, what are you adding in terms of, birds? Certainly the pelagic trip's going to add 12 to 14 birds. And then beyond the pelagic stuff, bird-wise, what are you adding? And I know mammal-wise, you're adding Mr. Tasmanian Devil.
Yes. So going up to some of the other areas in the north, you're increasing the amount of species you will see for sure. The 12 endemics can be attained on the shorter tours, so you won't hopefully miss out on them. But even in terms of time scale, I mean, say a strong-billed honeyeater can be something that is in a moving large flock. So you only fall across either a flock of 30 or you don't see any at all. So increasing your time on a tour, of course, increases your chances of seeing some of these birds well. But yes, you will see a great deal more birds in the north that you may not have seen in the south, in terms of some of the shorebirds, some of the water birds. The landscape is also another incredible reason to do the longer, because the Cradle Mountain area is so iconic. Any image you've probably seen of Tasmania has probably incorporated a few shots of that Cradle Mountain Lakefield National Park. It's very, very beautiful. And yes, the Tasmanian Devil is rather impossible to not to want to see. I'll just scroll back to that image. And that would be with the place that you stay when you're up in the north, you get a chance to see them in the wild. In the wild bit being the really unique thing. Other than that, you have to go to a wildlife park to see them. We have a tumor, a cancer, that moved through our Tasmanian devils and killed over 90% of them. And whilst there is hope on the horizon that they're managing to make recoveries, because so many people are doing wonderful schemes to help them improve, the numbers are very, very low. So to see one in the wild is really very, very special. And also we get quite a few vagrants. And if a vagrant is to come in, they come in more in the north than in the south. They're exhausted by the time they reach the south. They just turn around or pass out.
So, and we will, like on all of our video conference, we will send out more detailed information. Eventually, once we put up on the website the longer tour, we'll probably do contrasting frequency lists. I haven't got commitment from that yet, but we're going to get there between the short order tour and the longer tour. So more real data is coming. There's also and that'll also help us quantify the expected species count of both the long tour and the short tour. And the short tour ain't so short. I think it's 7 days, six nights or something.
They're both great.
Do that. Yeah, we're talking a 2 or 3 day difference in the field. Any other questions? And then I'll cover some administrative things. Any other questions out there at all?
My question was, what is the best month to come and get all the endemics?
It sounds like a cop-out answer, but they're with us year round, and our temperatures and our seasons are so consistent and lovely that it truly doesn't make a great difference. However, we do say from October to March is your window when you may think that everything is at its most perfect and active, and spring and breeding and sunshine, and yeah, so those are often the months that suit. But we don't even have to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning to go birding here. There is no lull in the middle of the day when it's too hot and the birds go and hide and have a siesta. You know, we can get up at a very reasonable 7:30 and have our coffee and toast and then go birding. This is not 6 a.m. lying in a ditch kind of birding. It's very civilized. So it's great year round. It really is.
Okay.
Right. Hey, and I just want to answer that question with a little different lens. You know, anybody going to Australia is typically seeing other parts of the country as well, just because of the flight time and the expense of getting to Australia. So typically a longer tour is sort of late September, October, November. And then for whatever reason, the month of May is also a good sort of window to do enough other parts of Australia to kind of make it click. And just a little sales plug. So far, our 2 Australia trips, which we have listed on our website, www.pibird.com, there's 2 slots left on the first date, maybe a third, and there's 2 slots left on the last one, which may expand to 4. Somebody's just got to sort out a postponed tour. Hopefully we can stop talking about postponed tours in 12 months. I pray thee this is true. But yeah, so please do check out our bookings on our tour. And I think we'll very well offer a third date, though my partners have to be available to make that happen. Australian guides are running really tight on time. So now is a good time to book, not to be too nudgy. But it is kind of the facts. And we are booking 2022 as well. So there you have it. I guess I got nothing more there.
We got
oh boy. Yeah, so Cindy Albarico asked, is it possible to do New Zealand and Tasmania together? And I would say absolutely. I would just book both far in advance, and truly a little custom tour in Tasmania with Ainala would make that actually pretty simple. I say that now.
Yeah. And we are on the same parallel as Christchurch over in New Zealand. So we have very similar conditions and same beauty and wildlife. And of course, they have the same clean, green, wonderful image, because they too are very reliant on their environmental image for their tourism. So they put a lot of work into ensuring the safety of their species. So New Zealand, I hugely recommend as well. My sister lives over there, so she loves it very, very much. We're also level with Patagonia, if you happen to want to think of where we are on the parallel, between 41 and 43.
There you go. Any other good questions, and then I'll hit a couple of other administrative things.
Did you mention the species count for the trip?
Well, we have a number that rolls around Tasmania for 379 recorded birds, but the top birders in Tasmania, their lists are only around 200, 220. So on a short tour, you'd expect to come away with 100 to 120 birds seen, because so many of those others are either additional pelagic ones or vagrant ones. So yeah, a solid number. Anytime I do maybe a 5-day plus tour, 100 is the target I'm aiming at, and everything over that's a bonus. And yeah, so we aren't the most insane numbers that you'll get on some tours, but we're very proud of all our birds. Every one of them is a gem.
Thank you.
And the longer term is going to add about 14, I'll call it 12 to 16 endemics. I'll also say every guide in the world underestimates their abilities. I would say 100, 120 is pretty safe. And then the longer tour, you are going to add some vagrants and stuff. So maybe on the longer tour, another 20 to 30 species, maybe 25, 35 species. And I quantify bird counts all the time. So I'm usually pretty got it. What do you think, Kat? On the longer tour, another 25, 35 species?
Maybe not quite as much. I don't want to poo-poo it in any way, but I just know birders work so hard for every incremental one. Once you get past that 120 mark, like it can be a slow build from then on. You need to move here. So yeah, you get them in big chunks early on, and then yes, of course, the pelagic adds on a lovely big selection more, but then it's just a couple a day after that.
Yeah, and our frequency list will help pin down that to exactly the species. And, obviously the vagrants and the coastal stuff, our birds you're going to see in the rest of Australia as well. Somebody did ask about the platypus being endemic to Tasmania. I know that it is not, but how much of Australia has the platypus in it?
So it's mainly on the East Coast. I think you'll find it in Queensland, New South Wales, maybe Victoria. Yes, Victoria. So yeah, down the east. But many Australians have never seen one in their entire life. It requires you to go out and stare at a river for at least a period of time and be patient, and dawn and dusk, and so it's an elusive creature even for an Australian.
Great. I'm just going to handle a couple administrative things before we run out of our recorded time. So a lot of people have bailed, but if your name has been mentioned on the video conference, and I think we've been pretty religious about not mentioning people's names, please email service@pibird.com too, so we can erase your identity if that's an issue of yours. Kat, you're stuck being identified. And Leo, you as well. But yeah, that is a privacy thing that we appreciate. And then do check out our website. All of our Australian guides are sort of in 4 parts, probably going to be expanded to 2 other segments as well in the next 12 months. On all of our tours, we focus on premier local bird guides like Kat Davidson. We're sort of experts in bird finding and who live locally. All of our guides have good English speaking skills, and they truly know how to find all the key species. Because we're not flying guides from around the world, our tours are about 20% less expensive than others, though truly in Australia, it's a little tighter than that. And our partnerships with locals always helps with other logistical expertise to make the tour go well. As well as we always save an acre for bird conservation for all of our bookings in 15 years in business. We have saved over, I'll just say over 90,000 acres, because I know we just bought a chunk more in the last year. Any other questions, feel free to contact us. Any other questions now, folks? We are getting close to the cutoff time here. Oh, we're past the cutoff time.
Yeah,
we'd be happy to take another question or two if they're out there. What, Leo?
No, we just passed a minute past.
Leo, we lose you?
Yeah, but there's nobody else any questions.
Yeah, we're just a minute past. We'll just take a few more minutes more in case there's a question, and then we'll sign off. I think we'll sign off, but I do want to say thanks to Kat Davidson. Excellent presentation, really, really good. So thank you, ma'am. All right, folks, I think that's about it. Thank you all for your participation.
My pleasure. See you in Tasmania.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kat.
Bye.
We'll be in touch. Yeah, bye.